All right, I'm gonna jump in here on day 5, I believe, since I planted these pepper seeds. Doing a little experiment this year. Went a little haywire with hot peppers, which I completely hate. I don't like spicy stuff. The only thing I can tolerate is jalapeno. That's about my max. So, why not grow things like the famous Carolina Reaper and Death Spiral or Apocalypse Scorpion or Dragon's Breath and all these other ones that are, I don't know, nightmarish is what I'd say. Get almost all of my seeds from Baker Creek and have had really good luck with them. This one here we tried last year, Sugar Rush Peach. That thing is so prolific, we ended up making about 20 cases of pepper jelly out of 4 plants. There were hundreds of peppers on every single one of them. Most prolific thing I've ever seen. So anyway, 5 days ago, I put all these different seeds in. Got them going in our, hold on, let me pull these off here. Got them going in our seeding trays. And I came down this morning and we have our first few seedlings coming up here. I don't know if it might be hard to tell in this light, these grow lights. I've got this setup of grow lights, LEDs. So I'm also growing angel trumpets, and I got experiment with some fairy ferns. These are tiny little dead plugs when I put them in, because we have them outside and they've spread everywhere. They're such a cool little plant. But I figured I'd try to propagate some myself, and it doesn't take much. Stick them in there, they sit for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden there they go. So anyway, back to the peppers. What I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna document these by pack as they go. Like I said, we're 5 days in. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I believe, 14 varieties here. Mostly all the hottest ones, except for some cool ones this year that were jigsaw. This has got a very variegated leaf. Thought was pretty cool. Just kind of growing it for the fun. And then these multicolored peppers I always think are cool. So I got a few varieties of those. And then of course this one down here actually is what they say is the sweetest pepper in the world. So that's more up my alley than the spicy ones. But anyway, I figured I'd start documenting what's going on here. Maybe I'll follow up. I'm not very good at sticking to things like this. Obviously, I'm not the greatest videographer in the world, but I'm going to take an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm basically going to have a cell for every single one of these cells in the pack, and I'm going to note what happens with them. And I'm going to kind of note how fast they come up. So this morning we've got, I don't know, a handful that are starting to pop through, different varieties, about 10, I'd say. Actually, the one that's doing the best is the sweet pepper. We've got about 5 in the sweet pepper row that are just starting to poke through the top of the soil. And I'm curious to see by the end of the day, tomorrow morning, since we know we're to that point where they're just starting to pop through, if all of a sudden they all start going. I know some of these are probably going to be a little bit more finicky than others. Some of them say up to 4 to 6 weeks, I think, to germinate. I'm pretty happy with 5 days in. We've got a variety coming up, some hot, jalapeno, that one. I kind of expect the ones that are less hot to be a little bit easier to grow. So, and you will see, the one thing I want to note here is that I got some mold growing on here. When I first got these cell packs, I filled them. There's water in the tray underneath. I went to Lowe's and I got this foil coated styrofoam insulation, and I cut it to the size of the table because I noticed that my heat mat underneath here, when I had it just sitting on this folding table, plastic folding table underneath, it was barely warm. Like, there was so much cold underneath because I'm in my basement and it's probably no more than 60 degrees down here. So just the heat it was losing through the table, I was reading about it and I saw that people were using this foil back stuff and other things. I bought this, it was pretty cheap, less than 20 bucks. I can cut the whole table size piece out of it, plus I've got a whole nother piece for a second heating mat. So I figured for 20 bucks, good deal. As soon as I put that underneath there, it's amazing how much heat is retained. I mean, it is cooking hot to the point where with the lids on a couple of these, I mean, I was churning through the water, but I think it was so hot and humid that I started getting mold growing on the surface of this. And what this is I did a kind of half and half mix of some regular Miracle-Gro potting mix and then half peat moss. I just mix it in just to make it go a little farther. And I figured I'd start with that. If that doesn't work, I'll change the mixture. And so far they seem to like it, but what I ended up doing after the second or third day I had these in there covered up, because the domes were getting so covered with moisture that it just wasn't letting any circulation. I ended up putting these popsicle sticks at the edges just to get a tiny bit of airspace in there, and it seems to make all the difference, even though I know some of the videos that you watch say keep the seeds covered until they germinate. I was afraid I was going to end up with more mold and fungus growing in here than seeds popping up, and I figured it was going to be too wet and they might start to rot as soon as they pop through. So I figured I was better safe than sorry, giving it a little bit of airspace. And that seems to be working. It doesn't seem to be as soaking wet underneath. It's still, there's tons of moisture still under the domes, but it's not just like a rainforest inside there. So might add a little bit more space as these get a little bit bigger, because I don't want them to rot at the base. So I may or may not keep you up to date. And if you see, this jar over here, booze and fruit, because I got a bunch of fungus gnats that came out of my angel trumpet cuttings, so I've been battling little flies all year long, which is a real pain. But anyway, that's why you see fly strips and all this other stuff, because otherwise they'd be everywhere. And didn't really want a bunch of flies upstairs in the actual house. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. Like I said, I'm going to note each cell to see which one came up. I can tell then whether or not it died or failed after it came up, and then I can note kind of day by day which popped up where. Don't know if there's any real reason for doing it that way. I'm just kind of more curious than anything to see how these do. So maybe I'll follow up and we'll see later.